Slasher movies are probably my favorite subgenre of horror, specifically 80s slashers, but there's some from the 90s and 2000s and even the 2010s that I find are pretty decent. The 80s, however, was the golden age of the slasher. They were exceptionally popular among teenagers and young adults, and even kids liked some of them. Like, Nightmare on Elm Street was huge with kids. Everybody knows Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. There was just something so entertaining about watching people get murdered by a hulking brute or a psychopath. Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Leatherface, and many more characters became synonymous with the slasher genre. It all started in the 70s with Halloween, and they just kept coming and coming, and got to a point where they really stretched it out. Like, most slasher characters have some sort of a gimmick or a motif, but it got kinda ridiculous. The things they'd come up with: at least 3 killer Santas, a killer Uncle Sam, a guy based on an upstate New York urban legend, and a girl with a dick. Like, near the end of the 80s, even the big franchises were having trouble keeping the audience's attention. It was really starting to wear thin, but sometimes the right answer is the most obvious answer. It just takes forever for somebody to find it. And by that I mean a creative gimmick, not a box office success, because the movie I'm going to review was not very successful. William Lustig is a name in horror who had worked small crew member roles in various horror and exploitation films such as Death Wish and Dario Argento's Inferno. He got his start directing and producing Joe Spinell's slasher film passion project Maniac, a movie that quite frankly is the most effective slasher movie of all time in terms of actually being a horror movie. It's pretty disturbing and at times hard to watch. Lustig would continue working in film until a chance encounter with exploitation horror producer Larry Cohen led to the two teaming up to create the movie Maniac Cop. Maniac Cop is like a smorgasbord of 80s movie culture. It's a noir mystery, it's a slasher movie, it's an action movie, and there's just a teeny dash of exploitation. For those who are a bit out of the loop, an exploitation film, by definition, usually means a film that uses a social or political issue or occurrence as a means to invoke a shocked reaction. So for this instance, the everlasting social issue of police brutality and government corruption is the subject, specifically taking place in 1980s New York, where police brutality and government corruption was running rampant. Maniac Cop has quite the powerhouse 80s cast, mixed in with a few local New York actors, or LA actors pretending to be New Yorkers. On the horror end of things, you have Bruce Campbell and Tom Atkins. On the more exploitation and action side, you have Laurene Landon, Richard Roundtree, and Robert Zadar, and local New York actors such as Cherie North, who you may remember as the actress who played Kramer's mother on Seinfeld. Like, nobody here is A-list, they were B, C, or D at best, but it's all familiar faces from the era. Also, the funny thing about this movie is it takes place in New York, and it has a relatively low budget, and yet it has more scenes that were shot in New York than Jason Takes Manhattan did. Like, even if this movie split its filming locations between New York and LA, it's still pretty sad that it features more New York than Jason Takes Manhattan, where the whole gimmick of the movie was that Jason was supposed to take Manhattan. And in the end, Jason Takes Manhattan has like 5 minutes of actual New York in it. So much like any action or crime movie that hinges on how crime-ridden New York would start, it starts with a woman about to be mugged and or sexually assaulted on the streets of New York. This was before Giuliani became the mayor and, cleaned up the crime problem, which is really sad to think of, that the only way to fix this type of corruption was with like a different kind of corruption. Oh god, and this part here, it always made me cringe laugh, because the guy's literally seeing a woman get like assaulted and possibly raped, and he just like continues taking his garbage out and does nothing. Which is why New York City has bystander laws now, where basically if you witness somebody being the victim of a crime and you don't do anything, you yourself can face criminal charges. I wish they would kind of implement bystander laws into Toronto, because people see shit happening to people all the time and just don't do anything about it. Like, people are on the subway like getting stabbed and shit, and nobody intervenes. It's like, bro, it's one guy with a knife. Everybody's like, oh, this is gonna interrupt my commute, I can't get involved. Honestly, the people of Toronto are such disappointments with like a lack of backbone, it actually makes me want to vomit. And every time one of these things happen, the mayor goes on about how we need like more safe injection sites, which that doesn't, like, no, I mean, safe injection sites aren't a bad thing, but the real problem is our revolving door healthcare system. You have people getting put into mental health care facilities for violent outbursts, and they're pretty much just let out without being properly treated. It's like, now Billy, you're not gonna stab anybody when you get out, are you? In short, Toronto has gone to complete shit and is kind of closer to what New York was in the 80s than what Toronto is supposed to be. The chase goes on for a while, a girl puts up a fight, and then she sees a cop who is just menacingly standing outside swinging a club in the middle of a park. Do cops do this? Like, I'm not a cop, but do they just sit there like holding their club menacingly like in fucking darkness? Okay, of course she realizes it's not a cop and it's too late because he just kills her. Like, I've heard of police brutality, but this is ridiculous. So how Maniac Cop starts out is it's this mystery. Who is the cop going around killing random people? And we follow Lieutenant McCrae, played by the legendary Tom Atkins and his cool mustache. Like, he's on the case. He's gonna find out who this maniac is, but there's also a bit more build-up here. Alongside McCrae, we follow Officer Jack Forrest, a cop who keeps working long nights and has a very strained relationship with his wife. I gotta say, it's a shame that this angle didn't get played up a little more because, quite frankly, Bruce Campbell is pretty good at melodrama. Likely because one of his first acting gigs was on a soap opera. The whole story here is clearly it's a strained marriage, and his wife still wants to make things work, but he just seems kind of past it and is more dismissive of it and is not doing a great job of hiding how past it he is.
Sometimes you wake up screaming like you can't breathe. Sometimes I get afraid that you might hurt me in your sleep.
Have I ever hurt you?
I know it's wrong to be afraid of my own husband, but
Now, why couldn't you say that to the therapist? Why couldn't you simply say, I'm afraid of him and I don't know why?
Now, Forrest's wife seems to be under the impression that Forrest is the Maniac Cop, likely due to the random phone calls she's getting.
He went out again, didn't he?
who is this? Why do you keep calling me?
Why does Jack keep killing people? Is he gonna do it again tonight?
Why do you keep doing this to me?
But upon following him out, she finds that he's porking someone on the force, Officer Teresa Mallory, played by Toronto's own Laurene Landon. The chick who has like a crazy strong jawline but is still a complete knockout. Like, the early melodrama bits are actually pretty good, and I honestly think they could have been featured a little more, but this is a slasher movie, so I do get why they kept it brief. Either way, the dialogue, the reactions, and the chemistry between Campbell and the actress who played his wife, Victoria Caitlin, is pretty solid. I honestly think this could have been the angle to open up the film. We could have just left out the Tom Atkins bits until the middle. Kinda not only show us more of how this marriage is falling apart, but to maybe lead us on a little more into actually thinking that Bruce Campbell is the killer. And I feel I should mention, because if I don't, someone's gonna get mad. I never watched Twin Peaks, but I do this thing now where every time I watch a movie, I make sure that if one of the cast members was in Twin Peaks, I mention it, or else I get like threatening phone calls and letter bombs, and I get called an idiot for having not watched Twin Peaks. So yeah, this is the woman who played Blackie O'Reilly on Twin Peaks. There you go. Leave me alone. Please stop sending me ricin in the mail. But no, instead of getting a rather nicely acted, if not a little cheesy drama bit in this movie, we just have the wife get killed by the Maniac Cop, like, almost immediately. Another one of the interesting things, which once again they don't play up on, is the media and the public reaction to the Maniac Cop killings. Like, after the Maniac Cop has wasted a few people, there's a scene where, you know, the news is talking about how it's a cop in uniform and people are starting to get troubled by it. Even the police officers are like, now everybody has an excuse to shoot a cop. We see a woman pulled over on the side of the road having some car troubles when a cop comes out to help her and she panics and blows his brains out. Okay, and honestly, this is kind of mean to point out, but the woman in this scene has like the most visible like herpes cold sore thing in the corner of her lip. Someone pointed this out to me and I just like, my eyes are just on that cold sore the entire time. And like, I'm a guy who gets cold sores, it sucks, but like, bruh. Like, the TV bits are sort of RoboCop-esque, but we don't really get a lot of like scenes like this.
You see a cop, you cross to the other side of the street. I see a cop, I'm out of here.
I've seen plenty of my friends murdered by cops, shot in the back, shot when they didn't have a gun or a knife, claiming the suspect had a shiny object. You know, cops like killing. That's why they're cops.
But the scenes we do get are pretty good, because we get Buck Flower speaking on it. And while this movie does depict the police officers as heroes, it does display that people more or less aren't shocked by the fact that there is a Maniac Cop. And hey, here we are in 2023, and a large percentage of cops do fit the bill of Maniac Cop. So with Forrest's wife being killed, we move from the establishing Act 1 to the elevating Act 2. Act 1 and Act 2 have a lot more Tom Atkins than Bruce Campbell. I do think it's cool how the movie does kind of show the layers of the police force and the discord between rank-and-file beat cops, detectives, and the leadership. Like how the captain and Forrest appear to have some cordial relationship when Forrest asks about his retirement plan, but as soon as Forrest accidentally incriminates himself in the murder of his wife, the captain is all business. And Forrest keeps his mouth shut during the interrogation. He doesn't want to say that he was having an affair, and the cops are grinding him for it, but eventually McCrae does realize that Forrest was set up by whoever the real maniac is, and is able to deduce that the maniac has access to the inside or has an inside source, and this is solidified when the maniac knows where Teresa is working undercover vice, which fortunately enough for Forrest, since he reveals it to McCrae, he's able to go and stop her from being murdered. Now, Laurene Landon isn't like a great actor in particular, but she knows how to work naturally enough where she wouldn't qualify as a bad actor. Like when she's trying to bust a John and gets made, she's able to just play the back and forth banter pretty well with him.
You want to be a little more specific?
You wouldn't be a cop, would you?
You got it, mister. You asked the jackpot question. Now, why don't you run along home to your wife and kids like a good little boy?
Yeah, it's just what I was gonna do. But I'll be thinking of you, baby.
Can't arrest you for that.
Ciao, baby.
And it's actually kind of funny and reminds me of a weird point in history where streetwalkers were actually attractive. And this is where the ADHD kicks in. Yeah, it's kind of funny, like, you don't see cops really do streetwalker undercover anymore. Because the majority of women who do prostitution on the streets now, at least where I am, are just these like mangled looking crack whores. Even the most like minging ass female cop would probably have to undergo like hours of Hollywood makeup effects to even be passable, and even then she probably couldn't even get the mannerisms right. It's pointless, like, and what it would just catch some guy getting a blowjob, like they don't do that anymore. Because of that, I don't think I've seen an undercover cop on Vice in Toronto since like the early 2000s. Regardless, the maniac tracks down Mallory to try and get rid of Forrest's only witness so he can keep operating in the shadows, but thankfully she is saved by McCrae. And I want to point out, it's like I feel I should say that none of these attack scenes have been totally hardcore. Like, they're alright. Like, the Maniac Cop drowning the guy in cement is kind of brutal if you know what happens when you drown in cement. But this movie is relatively tame compared to what like Friday the 13th and Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street were doing just a few years before. Now, this does come on the heels of the crackdown on violence in slasher films, but even still, this isn't much of a problem. What they can show, what they do is still effective. The mystery noir slasher thing works, and I'm shocked nobody has tried to do something more similar like in more recent years. So at this point, we're almost exclusively following Tom Atkins as the McCrae character starts to get deeper into the investigation and probes an officer who works with like the one computer in the department and knows where all the female officers are going to be at all times. And naturally, after tracking her, he finds out she's been interacting with a random cop who's hiding in a junkyard. And now, because I'm like a 30-year-old child, I give to you the Tom Atkins Shuffle. And at this point, we learn the name of the Maniac Cop is Matt Cordell, and he's sort of a deconstruction of the shoot first, ask questions later cowboy cop. It's interesting, we don't see too much of it, but he has news articles about busting heads and comes off as a real action hero type that McCrae and some others in the department actually looked up to. But the subversion here and the deconstruction here is that his renegade ways eventually started rattling way too many cages, and he was put in prison where he was almost immediately stabbed to death. Or was he? Because he's back now. I'm gonna get a little bit into this portion later because I have some things to say, but the whole story is that Sally was basically Cordell's girlfriend before all this happened, and when he got out of prison, or however he came back, she was helping him do his killings. But even she's bothered by the fact that he's going after cops and innocent people. Geez, lady, I really have to say, you don't seem very smart, but then again, I think she's dick crazy, because the whole reason she's crippled is because she tried to throw herself out a window after Cordell was arrested. Or killed. And so at this point, everything goes back back to the police station. Forrest is still in holding because he's trying to keep Teresa out of it, but at this point they don't really need to do it. He can just spill it. What, is his wife gonna leave him? Which I want to actually go back a bit to this like hilarious thing that I completely forgot about until now. Like when the lawyer shows up and just immediately begins trying to build the case for insanity.
I'm certain you had no control over what happened. Call it irresistible impulse. That's a legal defense. Better yet, maybe you don't even remember committing the crimes. Blackouts, momentary lapses of memory.
What are you talking about? I'm not crazy. I didn't do it.
You were seeing a therapist on a regular
Oh,
basis.
come on. A marriage counselor.
Much to Jack's annoyance. Alright, so here's where the movie enters its third act, when Teresa visits Jack, and McCrae tries to find some evidence on Cordell, but then he gets attacked by Sally, who knows she's on borrowed time. Then Cordell just massacres the entire police station. Like, he kills Sally, he roughs up Tom Atkins really bad, and I'm gonna dub this because this is funny.
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
And then Tom Atkins gets thrown out a window because he was not going to do this whole movie because he is much better than this. Actually, when he kills Sally, it's like, how does that even kill her? He's just like pushing her up against a wall. The MPAA really like screwed with horror. At this point, the focus shifts from McCrae to Forrest and Teresa. And it is a seamless pivot. It doesn't seem jarring. It's a good refresh. It's kind of a twist, you know, we spend so much time with McCrae that we really think he's going to factor into the conclusion of the movie, and then he gets thrown out a window. They even tease Forrest saving him, but he's just too late. There's some good looking crane shots of like the New York subway in New York City as the two go to Sing Sing prison and learn the origin of Cordell. I gotta say, this coroner, like, what is he doing? What is he even holding on to? That hair is awful. It's like, bro, just shave it. You have like this little tuft on the front of your head and then like nothing and then a toilet seat. So to explain how Cordell works is he was attacked and then declared dead, but the coroner realized his heart was still beating and did chest compressions and brought him back, sort of. But he was technically brain dead, and in order to just protect Cordell from getting killed in the prison, he let Sally take him, and he recovered. Which really raises another question. What is Cordell exactly? Is he like a revenant type of zombie thing like Jason? Like, he pulls a disappearing act, but there's no way he's a ghost. Did the brain damage make him superhumanly strong and durable, but also evil, or is he just something else completely? I don't know why I'm asking these questions. It's never elaborated on in the entire series, but I'm just going to assume he's some sort of revenant because he starts to look pretty grody as the series continues. And it's pretty clear that he doesn't really feel pain because he survived getting shot several times. So Jack and Teresa realize that Cordell's probably going to go after the commissioner and the police captain, and I should note that the commissioner is played by Richard Roundtree. But they don't really have anybody who can clear up any of the misunderstandings, and as a result, Teresa gets arrested because they think she's aiding Forrest. But then Shaft and gravelly-voiced character actor man get murdered, and I appreciate that despite having Bruce Campbell in the movie, it's really Laurene Landon that gets to do all the big hero stuff. She fights off Cordell, escapes arrest, and then when Forrest gets abducted by Cordell, she goes after him, and this makes me wonder, was Bruce Campbell just like not given a lot to do because he was expensive? Nevertheless, we get an exciting chase scene, not as exciting as the chase scene in Maniac Cop 2, but we'll get to it when we get to it. It all culminates in Cordell ending up at the bottom of the East River, which I gotta say, you know, that stunt double does not look anything like Bruce Campbell. He doesn't even have like the same colored hair. And the killer is defeated and everybody lives happily ever after. And if you really believe that, you're pretty gullible because it's a slasher film in the 80s. You better believe that there was no definitive ending and it ended with a sequel hook. Maniac Cop is a very strange movie. It's not overly violent. It's certainly not scary. It's like a mystery wrapped in a slight horror slasher movie and garnished with plenty of action scenes. On the surface, it's pretty lowbrow, but it's a fun little movie. But if you actually watch things, like there's a bit more care put into it than your average slasher film. Every performer in this movie seems to have a good back and forth with the other. Tom Atkins, Laurene Landon, Bruce Campbell's wife, and all the other characters play very well off of each other. Like, nobody does a bad job of acting, which, you know, in a slasher film, there's usually at least one person who has no idea what the hell they're doing. I really like the supporting characters, and I kind of wish we got to spend a little bit more time with them, because they have that kind of New York attitude, which is always fun, and like it's really fascinating for people not from New York to see New Yorkers. They're just a fascinating demographic with funny little quirks. For example, McCrae's partner, who's a homicide detective, but he gets kind of uncomfortable around dead bodies. Like, that's pretty funny. Whoever wrote that was like on the ball when they did that. And even the rank and file cops are pretty good too. Like when Forrest makes his big escape and he's like, I didn't do any of this, and like he has them at gunpoint and runs away.
I didn't do any of this.
Sure you didn't.
Put your guns over there. All right. On your face, both of you.
Hey, man, going after him?
You heard him. He didn't do it.
Like, there are little bits of dialogue and certain lines that are actually quite funny and charming. In terms of the flaws, though, like, it's not devoid of flaws. There are quite a few flaws. It doesn't really play up the media sensationalism enough, like I had mentioned. Like, they should have really been cutting to the news every so often as these killings kept happening. And it also doesn't really establish the roles of the commissioner and the captain enough to make it feel like they truly got comeuppance when they got killed, but it also doesn't show enough of their good sides so we feel bad when they get killed. They needed to do one or the other here, and they did neither. The three leads are likable, but everyone else is just a lot of quirkiness without any true substance. Special effects or whatever, Cordell looks better in the sequels, but Robert Zadar isn't really a hard guy to make look like a killer. He's huge. He has that disfigurement in his face that causes the muscle fiber in his jaws to keep getting bigger, and the makeup they put on him wasn't really extensive, but it worked. My main complaint here is that he kills a bunch of people, but none of the kills are like a whoa, like what is this, which is kind of a letdown when you watch it for the first time. I think Maniac Cop's biggest sin is that there was opportunity to utilize more of the story than they actually ended up utilizing, which in some ways is fine. It is a slasher movie, and the whole point of a slasher movie is to be fast-paced and easy to digest. And another minor complaint is like the movie has Bruce Campbell in it, and they do not make the most of him, opting instead to follow McCrae and Mallory. Like even in the climax, it's the Teresa Mallory character that gets to do all the cool stuff while the Jack Forrest character just gets tossed around like a rag doll. And I get it, Bruce Campbell's really good at being tossed around and getting hurt. I think his best aspect as an actor is his ability to sell physical harm and move, but I think this movie just needed more of him in it. I'm guessing like the timelines kind of line up on this. Maybe he wasn't as available due to filming Evil Dead 2, but whatever. It's kind of cool that Laurene Landon gets to be the hero and everything, but again, in doing this, you underutilize the biggest name in the movie. Although technically, I don't think he was that big around when this came out. He was like kind of just known for Evil Dead, and I think Tom Atkins was the bigger name, but nonetheless. A neat thing about Maniac Cop is it has a few interesting cameos. Like the director himself shows up, but then Sam Raimi's a news reporter, Danny Hicks from Evil Dead 2 and Darkman shows up as a cop, and former boxer Jake LaMotta, the basis for the story of Raging Bull, shows up as a detective because apparently he's William Lustig's uncle. And I neglected to mention this during the bulk of the review, but there is a rare extended version that was made for cable back in the day. There's not really a whole lot put into it, and most of it is just contradicted by Maniac Cop 2, but these clearly shot after the fact scenes follow the mayor, played by Ken Lerner, and his aide, portrayed by Leo Rossi. And the mayor knows that it's Cordell doing the killings and is worried that Cordell is coming after him because it was the mayor who really threw him under the bus. And in the TV version, the pre-end credits stinger features the mayor getting killed by Cordell. And it's really funny that all of these scenes are completely disregarded in the sequel and were really only made to pad out the runtime on television, which is something movies sometimes used to do. It's extra funny that Leo Rossi would be cast in Maniac Cop 2 as a completely different and much more memorable character. All in all, Maniac Cop is a very clever idea for a trending topic in movies at the time. It's above average in concept, but it's below average in execution. It's cohesive, it works, there's no real plot holes, but it doesn't be all it can be, which is a damn shame because William Lustig knows how to make a decent movie on a small budget. Something we would truly see the full potential of in the sequel, Maniac Cop 2. And one last thing I want to mention is that the score, which is pretty good, I'm going to play some of it over the credits, is a mix between a horror score and an action score, and it's composed by Jay Chataway, who you may remember as the composer of the score for several Star Trek shows, specifically Deep Space Nine. I recommend watching Maniac Cop if you haven't seen it. Like, there's a Blu-ray by Synapse, and it's probably on streaming somewhere. It's pretty good, but it should only really be viewed as a means to lead you into Maniac Cop 2, which is arguably one of the best slasher movies ever made, which, trust me, I'm gonna get there sooner rather than later. What are your thoughts on Maniac Cop? Let me know in the comments. What's up, guys? If you follow my community Wiki tab on my channel page. I said there was a major announcement following the Maniac Cop review, and we're at the end of the Maniac Cop review. So the major announcement is it's not good news, it's not particularly bad news either. The announcement is I'm going to be stepping away from this channel for an indefinite period of time. Why, you may ask? It's not any sort of real reason. I'm just completely burned out, and I feel I've kind of lost the passion for doing these videos, and I need to step away so that passion can re-enter my life. Like, this isn't about any sort of slow growth thing, because it's never been about me being popular. It's been about me talking about stuff that I'm passionate about and interacting with people who are also passionate about it. But I feel I've been kind of doing the same thing for way too long. I've been banging two rocks together and getting nothing out of it. Like, I wrote out 5 Halloween videos, and it was such a slog even doing 2. Freddy vs. Jason I recorded, Fright Night 2 I wrote, and I was running them back, and I'm like, I really don't like how I did this. I wasn't satisfied with it, and as a result, I was very disappointed in myself. So, Maniac Cop isn't going to be the last video before the sabbatical. I will give you Trios of Horror 4 to close off Halloween, but the sad reality is I need to step away, I need to get away, I need to change some things. I need to completely rework how my videos are presented and my entire work ethic, and in order to get to that, I need to just take some time off, I need to let the passion come back, I need to want to do this. The fact is, like, the Separate Vocations review kind of turned my head around because it was a video that I did out of nowhere. I had no plans to do it. I just said, hey, let's review that Simpsons episode, and as a result, it was probably one of my best videos in a very long time. And I'm like, why can't I just pump out this type of quality every time? And I realized it's because it got to a point where it's like I didn't want to do these, I felt like I had to, and that's no way to run a YouTube channel. That's no way to do a hobby, is the thing. It's like you should never feel like you have to do something if it's a hobby. I've been also working on some other projects on the side, which who knows where those are gonna go, but I've been kind of on that for now, so my sabbatical starts after the Trios of Horror 4 review. I can't give you a timeline when I'm gonna be back. My best guess is at the very earliest it'll be near the end of December, and at the very latest it would be probably at some point in February. Until then though, watch my old videos. I hope you enjoyed the Maniac Cop review, and I got the one more Trios of Horror 4 video coming up, and then that's it. That is the last you will ever see of the old Generation Y entertainment, and whenever I may return, be prepared to see a new and improved Generation Y entertainment. Happy Halloween, bitches.